In this series of videos, we're going to be learning about the most foundational pattern of music theory, that being what we call the scale, specifically focusing on the major variety, which is what we call the major scale. Now, the easiest way to introduce what a scale is just to write the simplest variety of scale, which begins on the pitch C, and because it's a major scale that begins on the pitch C, we simply call this scale C major, and you will notice that major is written in uppercase with an uppercase M because the short form for a major scale is indeed uppercase M. So if we find where C is located on the treble clef, middle C is our starting note usually, so we're going to write it down here, and then all that we need to do is count from C all the way up until we reach the next C, which is the third space of the treble clef. So our C major scale is going to be C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C, although singers are more intimately familiar with a system that we call solfege that is used to name every degree of the major scale. So in this case, these would be Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, before we get back to Do, and the significance of this system will be further explained when we explore how to construct major scales on notes other than C. So what exactly makes this combination of notes from C up to the next C a major scale? Well, in the final video about note reading, we explored the difference between whole tones, such as the distance between C and D, because when we go from C to D, there is a black key in the middle, C sharp or D flat. So this distance here would be a whole tone and a semitone, which is exemplified by the distance between E and F, because there is no key in between E and F. There is no separate E sharp or F flat black key in the middle. This is what we would consider a semitone. And if we actually look at the combinations of whole tones and semitones between each note of the C major scale, we see a pattern that is going to help us construct scales based on any note on the piano. So if we check between D and E, there's a black key between those two, so this would be a whole tone. We know that E to F is a semitone. Then if we go between F and G, there is a black key here, so this would be another whole tone. Same thing with between G and A, another whole tone. A and B has a black key in between them, so we have another whole tone. Finally, when we get back to C, B to C has no key in between them, and therefore this is a semitone. So again, the shorthand that I've used, whole tone I represent with the letter W, and semitone I represent with the letter S. Now, using this pattern of whole tone, semitone, whole tone, whole tone, semitone, we can mechanically construct a major scale on any variety of note on the entire keyboard, because all major scales follow this pattern of whole tones and semitones between each note of the major scale. Now, as an introduction to the following series of videos, there is a counterpart scale that we call a minor scale that is based on the major scale, but is usually the second most commonly used variety of scale. Now, singers have a particularly easy time with minor scales, because if we say that a major scale starts on Do, which in this case we're going to use C as Do, although as we'll see, Do can technically be any pitch. Minor scales, if we designate C as Do, minor scales will actually start on La instead. So singers, if they want to find what we call the relative minor scale, which is a scale that uses the same pitches as the major scale, just starting on a different note, we simply need to count down from Do, Do, Ti, La, in order to find what the starting note of the relative minor scale is. So in C major, if C is do, we can go do, ti, la, and find that the relative minor scale would start on A instead. And if we wanted to construct the A minor scale, we simply do the same thing as we did with C major, but we start counting on A instead. So we're using the bass clef here, so our A is going to be here. And all that we do is we write the pitches up from A until we get back to A again. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. Or if we are singers and we want to use the solfege syllables, we can go la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and we can see that we start on la and end on la once again. Now, in order to see that the minor scale has a different construction than the major scale, we can do a whole tone and semitone analysis to show that the whole tones and semitones are arranged differently. For example, between A and B, which we find here, A and B is a whole tone because there is a black key in the middle, but B to C is definitely a semitone because no key in between B and C. C to D is a whole tone, as we see on the piano. D to E is another whole tone, as we see on the piano. Then when we check E to F, this is our second semitone because there is no key in between the E and F white keys on the piano. F to G is another whole tone because of the black key in between. And finally, G to A is another whole tone. So if we review the major scale whole tone and semitone combination, whole tone, semitone, whole tone, semitone, is different than what we see for what we call a natural relative minor scale, which would be whole tone, semitone, whole tone, semitone, whole tone. So again, we have 5 whole tones and 2 semitones, just arranged in a different order than how the major scale is constructed. Before the next video, where we talk about how to more easily represent major scales on the staff, see if you can construct major scales and minor scales based on notes other than C by adding sharps or by adding flats to see whether you can construct major scales and minor scales according to the whole tone and semitone combinations that you have seen previously in this video.